Thanks, Ben. So, when I was in Chiang Mai about a year ago, the jewel of the north of Thailand, I attended this fair that claimed to promote all facets of northern Thai culture. And it was a great fair. And being the language learning lover that I am, I felt a deep urge to study the Lan Na language of the northern Thai people, or the indigenous language of that area. So I was immediately drawn to the mounds and stacks of books at the fair, and I perused through them trying to find some sort of instructional guide or some sort of manual to teach me the basics of the language. Things like the unique writing system, the tones, the pronunciation, grammar, phrases, just really basic stuff. I know this sounds a bit geeky, but I soon found out that this search was a fruitless effort. And this is because I later came to find out as well that there exists no quality and highly accessible resources on the study of this Northern Thai language. And so I went to ask the vendors and the merchants who were selling these books, oh, where can I find something like this? And they even did not know. They responded really cluelessly to my inquiry. And so after this, I just saw red. I thought to myself, how can an entire culture just throw away their language like that? How could they throw away their whole culture and history like that? But the answer to this is actually rather simple if you examine geopolitical developments within Thailand in the 19th and 20th centuries. So the nation state was a form of governance that arose rather recently, and it's attributable to many things. Things like the development of capitalism, mercantilism, political economy, and territorial geography. And one of the most obvious impacts of this form of governance is that the central government mandates a uniform cultural identity through instruments like state policy. They advocate for things like a common ancestry, common heritage, and crucially, a common language. Now, when a vast nation with nuanced cultural differences is forced to speak a single language, a phenomenon known as linguistic imperialism arises, and it's a form of imperialism that is within a country's own borders. Now, if we view this issue from a sociolinguistic perspective, it becomes apparent that this phenomenon is akin to the Darwinist theory of natural selection. And I apologize for any oversimplifications, but allow me to put it this way. We can view the centrally mandated dominant language as a species with highly favorable traits and adaptations, because it gives people higher socioeconomic standing, for example. It gives people access to greater jobs. It allows for greater class, prestige, and possibly even political power. All the while, non-standard indigenous dialects are left to fester. And speakers of these languages are not able to pass the backbone of their culture onto offspring. Therefore, the younger generation are barred from getting knowledge that was accumulated over generations and generations. Now, the Thai story follows this system, this model, word for word, and the origins of a nationalist central government can actually be traced back to the reign of His Majesty the King Rama V, who established the Monton system, or the regional system, which was a means of administering the country during the period of rampant French and British colonialism in Southeast Asia. Power radiated from the central authority towards the most far-flung regions of the nation. And while this was an extremely effective and necessary measure that shielded the country and protected its independence, one of the main impacts of this was that it set the stage for the decline of culture and languages in all of the country's three principal regions, the North, the Northeast, and the South. The Central Thai dialect, which we're all familiar with today, was designated as the lingua franca of this new nation. So, in the North, local lords and kings lost their power, resulting in the decline of the Lan Na language and their culture in the North. In the Northeast, the various dialects of the Isan language spoken, which was written at the Lao alphabet, it was written with the Laotian alphabet at the time. This alphabet was banned and replaced with the Central Thai alphabet in order to forge a more close connection with the dominant culture. And in the Deep South, where citizens are predominantly Muslim, their culture was discouraged as well. As Central Thai spheres and Muslim spheres diverged, what happened was the Arabic script that was used to write many, many languages of the Malay people of the South was also discouraged and replaced with Central Thai as a language of instruction. Now, a phenomenon like this raises vast socioeconomic implications because when you rob a community of their language, you're robbing them of their self-worth, pride, identity, culture, history. And as a result of this, it impedes political power. It creates a sense of dependency on the main dominant culture. And in addition to this, it creates this system of negative association. And what I mean by this is, for example, in Thailand, urbanites and urban dwellers may, for example, view speakers of many non-standard dialects, such as the Isan dialect of the Northeast. They may associate these people with the working class, uneducated, bumpkins, people with no education, which is an unfortunate perception, but it is true in some cases. Today, if you travel up north, you'll find that the use of the Lanna language in professional settings is essentially defunct, and that it's used and reserved for specific religious institutions or in familial or home settings. And while studies by local universities in the region have in fact found out that these languages are favorably looked upon by inhabitants, and people like to see it incorporated into their curricula, they want to know how to read and write and speak as well as their ancestors did, the sheer impracticality of having this as a language has prevented such reform from happening. Similarly, if we look at the Deep South, UNESCO just recently designated the Patani dialect of the Malay language as vulnerable and at risk of endangerment. This is once again due to the overwhelming influence of the dominant Central Thai culture. The United Nations once stated that in regards to language, language is intrinsically linked to and a part of indigenous peoples, cultures, and beliefs. It marks their distinctiveness and cohesiveness as ethnic groups. For example, without language, would you, Akshara, be able to connect with your Tamil culture and ancestry? You, Akshara, are able to enjoy the dances, songs, religion, and arts of your ancestry because you know your native language. Now, this leads on to my next point. What change can we implement? Well, this is where we all come in. Even though linguistic imperialism, as I have put it, is a rampant issue in Thailand, it is far from an isolated phenomenon. And I trust that in all of your respective countries, this phenomenon is occurring as well. And I also trust that in all of your respective countries, all vulnerable communities have something inherently worth preserving, whether it be lore, mythology, dance, culture, history, all of that. Take, for example, the Kalawaya people of Bolivia, who have a language intrinsically linked to medicinal plants of the rainforest, and some of this knowledge is not even known to Western science, or the Sora language of some tribes living in the Orissa state of India, and the morphological properties of which are so valuable to the studies of linguistics. A national social survey carried out in the northern part of Australia in the Torres Strait region also discovered that Aboriginal citizens who speak indigenous languages are in markedly better physical and mental health. They are less likely to be arrested by the police on charges for drug abuse or alcohol. And those between the ages of 13 and 17 in rural and urban areas are in fact more likely to be found in schools. Now, what can we do as individuals? You may be asking yourself, how can I as an individual save an entire culture or save an entire language for that matter? Now, I'm not asking for anyone to implement drastic social change or political reform, but I think the first thing that we have to consider is recognize this plurality of languages in your nation. Question whether one single language in a vastly diverse country is in fact the best solution. I'm not advocating for any political agenda or some globalist dogma, but I'm looking at this from a political perspective, because if you give a person their heritage back, their culture back, and their history back, you are arming them with the necessary means to be empowered and be active members of their communities. And if you have the chance, interact with people from these minority indigenous groups. There may be more around you than you think. And I previously stated that learning languages may be difficult due to the really few resources available, but there's vast new amounts of research being put forth that will allow for this to happen soon. So learn a few words, learn a few phrases, learn a bit of grammar. And the more linguistically conscious you become, the longer these languages will survive, and they won't be victims of linguistic imperialism. As a member of the Navajo Nation once said, every breath that you take without a language that is your own, you might as well be dead already. Thank you.